Okay, well, I think we might as well just go ahead and get started in honor of people being here on time. And I've got a pretty full agenda. Let's see, I wanted to put a link into the chat for the notes. Did the wrong one there. In case anybody wants to add notes or put your name down, I will add to. I'm taking notes as well, but just in case. So did anybody have anything they wanted to add to the agenda? Okay, sounds good. Well, most of it's reporting, except perhaps for the section down here with enabling fair data, which hopefully we can get to fairly quickly. Just in terms of the reporting, as you might recall, I was present and other people were present at the AGU Data Help Desk and Data Fair in New Orleans in December, and it was a very interesting experience. I don't know if anybody here was probably not on the desk, but it was the first time to have a help desk, and it was in the poster hall. We fielded a lot of questions about posters, unfortunately, but there also were really good questions about a few good questions about help that people needed for data, working with data. And we had a whole host of workshops and demos and other kinds of ways where people who had questions could come see what those tools or presentation workshops could offer them. Several of them were for a setup for data management training Clearinghouse. And it was interesting because the physical setup, the way it was set up, was really very conducive to workshops per se. There was a big monitor where people could stand in front and others could present. And so some sessions worked better than others. And in terms of the workshop format, I don't think anybody really did their slides. If the distinction between workshops and demos was working one-on-one or doing kind of a standard workshop format. So we didn't do any of those because it wasn't conducive, but there were a lot of people who were coming to the demo laptops themselves, and so were able to work with people. That was true for all of the tools, including the Clearinghouse. So I think it was successful in that way, and we also identified a number of resources that we could add too. So it was including with tool developers. So that I think was successful in that case, and definitely worth the effort. And then the data fair was a session about capacity building in which we were answering questions. It was an interesting format that Shelley Stahl had set up, and that seemed to work out well. It was interesting. I'm sure you can find out more about those. I think they were recorded if you wanted to find out more. But that's basically the story there. So any questions about that, or anybody else? I don't think it was anybody else. Or Bob, you were there. Did you have anything? You weren't really at the help desk, but anything at the AGU that be worth reporting?
Yeah. Well, I attended that. It was a town hall session there that I forget which night it was. Was it Tuesday night or maybe I think it was Monday? Which was really interesting, and there were actually lots of great sessions, the regular sessions, as well as the posters. It was tough to decide where to go, although because the place was so big, often we're limited to what was close.
Right. Yeah, it was almost a mile. 0.7. Dan Keyes measured. It was 0.7 of a mile from one end of the conference hall to the next. So you really had to have your hiking shoes on to do it. But yeah, good.
Yeah, this is Kirsten. I wasn't there personally, but one of the AIDA staff had a session on the whole physical sample registration.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And also Andrew was there too, right? Andrew
was there too. Yeah, they were. I had the feeling they were a bit disappointed about the location and the confusion with posters and so on. I mean, they did have some people come, but it seemed it wasn't visible enough, and maybe also, an overload of data events. That's, just something to consider maybe in the future. It's something I want to talk to Shelley about. That it becomes a bit overwhelming. So,
right. Yeah. No, I think that both. Well, let's see. Aaron and Shelley. Well, I think it was Aaron actually put a survey out for people who were at the desk and who made presentations to see what people thought. And I think I haven't seen the results of it, but I think that there was definitely a consensus that it would have made maybe more sense to have all of the data to get all of the people who were presenting information or help desk. As AIDA was, right, you had kind of a help desk, and another organization had a help desk, plus ESIP had a booth, and then there was this thing out in the poster hall. So it made a lot more sense to get together. So people didn't, and then definitely it was true that people didn't know, where the help desk was because the signage was not good. So so that's definitely true. But but when they got there,
the idea is really great. But that was actually something that Megan and Andrew said to me, that they would have liked to see this all more consolidated in a single location, and all these the booths actually that have to do with data. It's kind of difficult because there are some activities like IRIS or UNAFCO, they do data, but they also have their science community, right? So they want to be that NSF aisle with respect to their science communities. And, but I mean, I think we have some room for improvement.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, and I also think there was, it was a really good start, for into the unknown. So best laid plans. I felt like we were operating on Plan B most of the week, but that's okay. That's kind of learn how to dance anyway. So good. Yeah, those are good comments. That's good to hear that Megan and Andrew were. Those comments, I mean, I think, and hopefully they responded to the survey to let Aaron know that too.
I think so,
yeah. Good. Okay, great. Anything else on that then? It's fun to be in New Orleans. But,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice.
Okay, well, let's move on then to a kind of a quick précis of what's happening at ESIP Winter. I think that we've got three different sessions that are set up. I see Raleigh joined. Hi, Raleigh. Raleigh Martin was there and interested in what we were doing. So nice to have you on the call. Hi, Raleigh. Sorry,
I'm a little bit late.
That's okay. You're here. That's the important thing. That's what it takes sometimes. So Tuesday, we have sessions on Tuesday and Thursday. The first one on Tuesday is working on building an assessment framework for the DMT Clearinghouse. And I've got the session description there if you want to go. It will be, in the context for this in relation to the Clearinghouse is that, well, first of all, that we are, as you may or may not know, we are applying for, we're invited to move to the second stage of proposal writing for an IMLS grant that, for the National Leadership Grant with IMLS, which is a museum and library science. And the main focus of that grant is to expand and enhance the Clearinghouse in terms of both the breadth of resources that are available, educational resources that are in the Clearinghouse from different subject domains, so in more science and more social science in particular, but also the depth in the sense of trying to find as many kind of specific instances or examples of data management, skill development, and so on per subject domain as possible. So part of that is to do two things. A couple of things. One is to set up an advisory board, because not only do we want to do that anyway for the Clearinghouse, but for strategy and also probably for some editorial review and help with the metadata scheme itself, but also then to associate some kind of an assessment framework for the resources that are in the Clearinghouse. And as we started talking about this a couple of meetings ago, it turned out that there are a number of ways that you can think about assessment. And so what we decided to do was to take that discussion to ESIP and see, what the community thought would be useful to do. So Viv Hutchison from USGS and Data One is talking about what Data One has done in terms of evaluation, and then Bob Downs will be talking about what he's done, what he and his group have been doing at CSUN and CDAC. So, and then Sophie Howe will be available to possibly, if it comes up that people are interested in learning about the tool that she helped create for Data One that can be used for evaluation. So, but the main idea, besides those presentations, is to really have a conversation about, what would be useful. Because we've also talked about assessing the resources that are in the Clearinghouse from the point of view of what people learn, the impact on the learners, and also though the quality of the educational resource itself from kind of an educator-teacher point of view. So that's what that one's going to be about. And definitely we're interested in having people come who, even if you're not presenting, but you've got anecdotes or experience doing this sort of thing, that's what the intention for that one is. So any questions about that? Okay, and then moving on, Thursday we've got two sessions. One is moving a successful incubator project into sustained science gateway, and that one it's broadened a bit because it seems like there's an interest in ESIP, more generally to talk about, what ESIP does in terms of fostering projects that are kind of considered incubator projects, and then, what needs to be done or what could be done, what has been done to move certain projects into, more of a sustained production environment. We're doing it within the context of the National Science Foundation Science Gateway. So we've got a short presentation from Sandra. Well, Sandra won't be there. Sandra Guessing she's at Notre Dame, but working with the Science Gateway Institute. She'll be presenting a little bit about the Science Gateway, and then Erin and I went to the boot camp in October of last year, with the Clearinghouse in mind. So I'll talk about that experience a little bit, and then Chris Leonard will be there because he's also gone through the boot camp and been working into that, trying to move projects from Incubator forward, as well as Annie Burgess, who's in charge of the lab, the ESIP lab, which of course is doing that all the time. And that is called a lab now, but it was the products and services test bed. So again, we're going to be talking about, all those people will be discussing what's been from their own experience. But again, the idea is to have a conversation about what, if anything, ESIP can do to help foster that next step, or, if anything it can be done. So it should be interesting to see what happens there. And of course, from the Clearinghouse point of view, that's something we definitely want to do, is move from incubator to sustainability, and so it'll be interesting from the Clearinghouse point of view as well. So any questions about that or comments? Okay, and then the third one on Thursday is talking about governance for the Clearinghouse, and again, this is driven partly by the fact that we want to do this anyway, but also with an IMLS grant, and we are also considering the possibility of applying for an NSF cyber infrastructure grant later in the year, the next month or the next year, and all of those require advisory boards as well. So, or some sort of community involvement and help with strategy. So that session will have a couple of people talking about what could be done. I mean, Carl Benedict will be there. Carl's the PI for the IMLS grant. He'll be talking about his thoughts about it. We were going to have Amber, I don't know if we talked about having you or someone from Data One be able to just discuss a little bit about the path that Data One has taken in terms of moving from, the choices that have been made for governance and how that's worked and so on. Is that still feasible, or?
So that, I mean, sorry, there's a tree happening right now. That's something that I can do remotely, but it might be more valuable to see if Dave Iglesias could do that. He would be physically at the ESIT meeting.
Okay.
So let me reach out to Dave. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, it'd be great to have you on remote, but certainly face to face, as you know, is the both of you would be great. So okay. Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, but so the idea for that one is really, again, to have a conversation with, partly we're interested in, also Bruce Caron is going to be talking as well about the experience that the new Earth Archive, whatever you would call that, consortium, or I'm not sure what it is, but the preprint archive that has been set up in the last couple of months, what the process they've gone through to set up an advisory board. So it's a little bit more of a ad hoc development of a board than maybe we would have anticipated, but who knows what would work for the Clearinghouse. So that'll be an interesting session too. And again, what we're interested in having a conversation, but also finding people who, have experience and who would be interested in maybe working with us on it. So that one's going to be a little bit more informal, but hopefully a lot of the people who have committed to working with us on the IMLS grant will be able to at least call in or be there. So, any comments or thoughts about that? Okay. All right. Well, then the Enabling Fair Data, we've got John Petters and Eric Olson on the call, who are part of that TAG-C working group. And let's see, are people on the call fairly familiar with what this Enabling Fair Data project is? Sounds like yes.
Well, I am.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you're not, say something. Put it that way, I guess. Sounds like everyone is. Okay. Good. So we there is a TAG-C. I forgot what that stands for again. Something adoption group, working group that was set up to implement guidance and training for researchers on repositories and fair data, and I'm co-chair with John Petters, and Eric Olson is helping out with the logistics and targeted adoption group. Thank you, John. And Eric Olson is helping with logistics and so on as well. So what we have been talking about doing, and I'm going to let John talk a little bit here since he was actually at the meeting. He and Eric, I think, were actually at the meeting. So just talk a little bit about what the plan is, or what the intention was for this group, and then we've been working on a draft charter too that I can show on the screen too. But John, do you want to talk a little bit about background for the TAG-C, what the intention was?
Yeah, I wasn't super prepared, but
I know. Yeah.
Put me on this spot. Well, so this is one of the things that folks at this meeting, we're in the meeting, is more talking about how can we all enable fair data to occur within Earth and space sciences. And there are many of these adoption groups that have different foci, but one of them is that we all there was agreement that we did need to worry about how do you help researchers and potentially other audiences like data managers know how to do this. So providing some sort of training resources for people to actually change their behaviors and not just going to do it, even if they think it's the right thing to do, they need to know how. So we talked quite a bit about how can we help facilitate this in a very short time frame. And one of the things that we did coalesce around to some extent, and that Nancy and I have kind of extended a little bit, was the idea of just leveraging what ESIP has already done, which is develop this data management clearinghouse, and just work on trying to add more resources to it. So to first aggregate resources that everybody who was assembled at the meeting there in this particular group knows about, and get them all aggregated and put them in a position, a good position to be inserted into the clearinghouse. And that's happened to some extent. We'll probably want to have a little bit more push from the wider group to get more resources in there and catalog them, map them to FAIR principles in some way or some form or another. Which I think that would be a good time to talk a little bit about the general plan we were discussing yesterday.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so what I've got up here is the draft version 2 of the charter that we've been talking about for this group. And I mean, the important thing to note is the purpose John talked about already, although there's a little bit of a question I think we need to discuss about who our audience really is. And one thing I should say as a context for this as well is there's a meeting, I'm sure Kirsten knows about this as well as Raleigh. There's a meeting on Monday next week, just before the ESIP meeting of the whole TAG groups, the whole community, such as it is at the moment, where we talk about progress and so on. The timeline is pretty tight on this, so it's everything's supposed to be done by April 20th, I think, of next year. Whoopee! So, so we have to be a SWAT team here with what we're going to do. So in light of that, what we thought we could do with this TAG C group is, as Jonathan mentioned, pull together, look for educational resources that would teach about the FAIR principles and put them into the clearinghouse, and then also associate. There's a mechanism within the clearinghouse where you can associate both keywords, of course, which could be any of the principles that are associated with FAIR, either at some level, either the top level or the findable, accessible, interoperable, or reusable, or more detailed if we want to. So we could either do keywords or we have a mechanism for associating what we call an educational framework that can have both, so if there's a FAIR principle framework and then the steps below it, which, again, could be either FAIR, F-A-I or R, could be associated with different principles. All of that would need to be, done kind of thoughtfully. So I'm not sure, one of the things Jonathan and I talked about was, how can we really get people to focus on these tasks for some amount of time, given everybody's over-involvement and, work, daily jobs. So once they were found and once they were mapped, then they would need to, the idea would be taken into the clearinghouse, and then of course a report. Those are the deliverables we talked about. In terms of timeline, what we thought maybe we could do is just have different kind of what I'm calling crowdsourcing events, but just basically, online webinars for an hour to an hour and a half. One where everybody who's on the call, spends the time looking for resources and puts them either on the spreadsheet that Jonathan created, or submits them very briefly to the clearinghouse, because there's that easy way of doing that, and one of those sessions for Australia and Asia, Australia, Asia, and one for Europe and the Americas, because the time differences are so vast. So one on finding resources, and then another one to actually do the mapping. So having people look at the resources that were found and saying, this one seems to be talking more about accessibility. This one seems more to talk about reusability, and kind of putting that into a spreadsheet, as we go, and then just taking that the information that was gathered there, and then putting that either as time allows during the April, from now to April timeframe, putting them into the clearinghouse, or certainly doing it afterwards. But part of what the idea then would be to, as people were looking at the mapping, doing the mapping, there'd be some idea of what and whether there were gaps in the educational resources that we found, that it would address some of the FAIR principles. So it would give us something to go, something to go forward with in terms of soliciting other kinds of training materials. So that's what John and I were going to propose as a start, and love to have comments about that now, and or certainly at the meeting on Monday. And Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add. Go ahead if you do.
I think the plan sounds great. I like the idea of frequently checking in and giving everybody a prompt to participate, even if it's an hour at a time. So I like that idea a lot.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anybody else? I see Shelley's arrived. Hi, Shelley.
I think she's only just coming on.
Oh, so don't hit her yet?
Yeah.
Give her a break? Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Shelley. We were just talking about you.
No kidding.
No, not really.
What action items did you assign me?
Nothing yet. We were just talking about the tag C.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah, John and I and Eric, to some extent, have come up with a draft for the deliverables, and a draft version 2 of the charter. So.
Fantastic. And I don't mean to interrupt you. I can go on mute and fade away.
Okay. Well, I had just gone through it all and just wanted to see if anybody had any comments. So you can certainly catch up, and we'll talk about it on Monday anyway. So.
Great. Thanks.
Yep. And Sophie too.
Actually, Shelley, while you're on here, I know you've sent multiple emails about it, but could you just say a little bit more about kind of the opportunity on Monday for both kind of collective action among all the tag groups, and then kind of specific working time for the individual tags, such as tag C?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about Monday. We're going to have 3 sessions all together, 2 in the morning and 1 right after lunch, talking about things that cross over the tags, and some of our harder topics, actually, and I'm jazzed about that, to be able to get to those. And then at 2 o'clock, the tags will have 3 hours, and we can divide across the rooms to work on whatever your objectives are.
And I think you sent out a note more broadly than just the people who had originally been part of the tag group. So anybody can join it at this point, right? If people are interested in
crazy, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is good and bad, right? So I'm getting a lot of didn't know about this, won't be there on Monday. Can I participate? So I'm giving them their intro stuff, and which is great, because we're going to need lots of excitement. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that the tags are actually digging in, and it'll be hard to add new folks. So a little bit of a balance act here. Mm-hmm. You may notice I didn't really tell people outside our group until sort of last minute. That was by design, because it would have a big impact if a lot of new people showed up. So it was a real balance there. Yes, we're inclusive, but yes, we need to get things done. So both and. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
So it is open. people can come and they're welcome to.
So one just detailed question. I noticed in the email you sent this morning that there are 3 rooms with remote access capability. I assume that will cover all of the morning activities, but in the afternoon, is there a remote access possibility for individual tags, or what is the technical capacity there?
We have 3 rooms. So in the morning, up till 2 o'clock, we're only going to need 1 room.
Right.
And I think the one they have us assigned to is the largest, although we may have some mild surprises when we show up. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll figure out which tags want to hold a session. Not everybody's actually doing that. Some folks are in good shape and are considering joining others. And I told the publishers, this isn't really focused on publication. This is going to be focused on repositories primarily. They'll certainly have a lot of interest because it'll be things that cross over to them, but we really want to focus on that stakeholder community with the challenges that, I think from my personal opinion, I think the load on repositories is bigger and not as well understood generally for all of the different elements, and they're going to need more support and focus. I think the publishers are farther along. They have more policies that have been worked out across publishers, which is fantastic, but they don't have as much actual work to do other than adoption, which is hard enough.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. So it sounds like if a group needs access to remote meeting tools, there probably won't be too much demand, and those groups that have the demand will be able to get it if necessary.
I think so. I think we will. I actually thought we only had 2 rooms, and when he sent me the connections to 3, I thought, oh, boondoggle, this, I'm just, yay. So I think that will cover us, the 3. And then anyone who doesn't need remote access, we do have some smaller groups that could go into a hallway. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies in this building, so
okay.
That'll be absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Raleigh, did you want to talk just briefly about what the Tag G group is doing? Either, I know there's not much to report necessarily right now, but maybe the plan that your group on Monday, since we're talking about it anyway.
Right. Yeah, there's not really much to report. I think we're continuing as more of a liaison group than an actual working group or action group. So I have a phone call with Stephanie Sins this afternoon.
Oh, good.
To kind of get an update on what she's been doing with the various RDA working groups. So I don't think, I'm going to send out an email to all the Tag G people this afternoon, but so far there's no plan for us to meet. So I will probably just be dropping in on the various other tags to see what kind of activity is occurring, and then be able to report that out to the Tag G people to kind of continue in that liaison capacity. So that's really about it. I guess my one kind of personal opinion is that it would be very useful to align some of the activities with data management plan guidelines and active data management plans to the training, because I think the two kind of go hand in hand. So that's why I'm very curious to kind of continue engaging with the training group to see how that can inform the development of the kind of existing efforts for development of data management plan guidelines.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to do, I think. So, and as I suspect what we may do at the Tag C discussion is to talk, to some extent about the level at which we would want to find resources associated with FAIR. So, the top 4 terms are pretty broad and not necessarily directly related to data management plans from somebody who doesn't necessarily know what that means, is sort of new to the topic. So digging down a little bit more into what that means would certainly, I think, it seems like it would associate more precisely or more specifically to the activation of the DMPs. So yeah, that sounds good. We'll see how that can be developed. Okay, good. Any questions or comments about any of that? Do people know? I think everyone here who knows what each of those groups are, right? So we've been throwing around C and D and G. Okay, good. Okay, great.
Oh, one more thing. I just realized I wanted to convey this message from Stephanie, which is to say that there is a Data Management Plan Common Standards Working Group in RDA, which is in the process of collecting use cases in GitHub. So if the Data Management Training Clearinghouse, that's this group that's talking now, wants to submit anything, I would encourage them to do so.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure. I'll need to talk to her on the phone to get clarity on what that means exactly, but I don't know if there's an interest in this group for submitting use cases. It sounds like it's a little bit out of scope at this point.
Use cases for what? About what and for what purpose?
I think for the development of common standards for data management plans. So that's an activity that falls more within the Tag G group for data management plan activation. But you know, if there's a component for what the Tag C and what the ESIP data management training groups are doing in terms of interacting with communities, and if there's a component of that that's collecting use cases, then I think those use cases would be relevant to data management creation.
Did anybody else get that huge sound?
No?
No?
No.
Jeez, okay, it must be my end. Wow. Maybe the tree fell on my house. And there's something, this huge sound, sorry. Okay, good, so you heard everything.
Nancy, you got really quiet though.
Well, that's I turned it off because
okay.
It was so loud. I was worried that I didn't know where it was from. So okay.
Okay, so well, wow, okay. Maybe what I'll do is I'll after I talk to Stephanie later, I will just send a link to this group that provides a portal for contributing these use cases. And if it turns out to be something you're interested in, go ahead and contribute. But if not, no big deal.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds very useful. Okay, thanks. All right, let's see. Let's go back to the agenda then, and let's see, the IMLS grant. I guess we can talk about that as well. So what we're doing with this grant, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is Carl Benedict from University of New Mexico is the PI on it. I'm co-I, and we are we were invited to move to the next phase, which is to submit a full proposal by the 16th of January. So we're in the process of writing that. And we should have a draft finished by the end of this week, which will then need to be vetted next week and finalized the following week because it's only 2 weeks away. So part of so I think, as I mentioned earlier, not everybody was on the call, but what we're intending to do is to work on the main intention is expansion and enhancement of the clearinghouse, but specifically in terms of the inventory of what's in the clearinghouse, make it broader range and deeper range into different subject domains and more specificity, especially for different kinds of activities that can really help general courses. And then, general resources on data management, but then we're also want to build in both governance in terms of strategy with an advisory board and an assessment framework, and then also refine the metadata schema a little bit to make it more specific towards different subject domains as well. So because this is a museum and library science grant, and because we want to do this anyway, and we've gotten feedback from the data librarians in particular that this would be an area that they would really be interested in participating, submitting resources, but also, taking resources themselves as part of their jobs to do that kind of instruction. That's going to be one of the main ways we focus. So we're talking about inviting or presenting workshops at different places, including ACRL and RDAP. If in 2020, if we get, all of this, assuming we were accepted for workshops, to both raise awareness, but also really get some feedback on, the kinds of things we've been able to do to enhance and expand the Clearinghouse in the future. So, during the proposal timeframe, the project timeframe. So, I just wanted to kind of apprise you of all of that, and we will be looking for organizations to submit letters of involvement and participation. We talked to some people about that already, but if the specifics of what that would look like, would also be up on either Google Drive or a Microsoft OneDrive that Carl uses, where sample letters would be there, and then you could put them there if you want to. And so we're looking for people to do that, and then we're sort of jumping the gun with the discussion on governance at the ESEP meeting, because as I said, we want to do that anyway. So I don't know anything else. We definitely would be interested in having people look at the proposal itself, for how it makes sense, whether it makes sense, other kinds of communities and organizations that we may want to get in touch with, either for the proposal or in the future as we go forward. Because a lot of this we're going to be doing anyway, but it'd be nice to have a little funding to help out. So, and part of what we're doing is adding enhancements to the functionality and the web interface of the Clearinghouse based on the user feedback we've already gotten in the last year or so. So that's short information about it. Anybody have any questions or comments? No? Nobody has anything?
Nice work, Nancy.
Oh, okay. It's not done yet.
I do have a question, Nancy.
Sure.
Just kind of looking forward, really. After the 16th, what happens next?
Oh, well, they have, their process is they have peer review of the proposals. So they have panels that look at the proposals and make recommendations, as they did for the first phase of it. Oh, one thing that actually is kind of good news. Carl had talked to the program director at IMLS for this project, and she said that there were over 200 two-page proposals put in, and 47 chosen. Thanks, Eric. Talk to you Monday. There were 47 chosen, so we're in a good standing in that case. And then she said that she thought there was a pretty good chance, maybe a little bit more than 50% or around 50% chance that it could be funded given the monies that are available. So seems like there's a promise there. Worth the effort.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. So, okay, sounds good. Well, if you, I might be approaching some of you for specific support with the letters, but that's basically what's going on there now. So the only other thing then, unless somebody has something else, is just to talk about upcoming conferences or ideas about where we could be talking about either Tag C in the future or or the Clearinghouse in general, or any of these kinds of topics that are related to what we're trying to do. Any ideas?
Nancy, I have a question, please. I
Sure.
don't know if this is covered already since I came in late. So with the publishers group, people have started to talk about if they're going to be able to provide some guidance and they're going to put together some kind of recommendations for any sort of data management related issues, like looking for a repository or peer review. What does it mean to peer review? Who should peer review what and to what level? Would that be something that we could collect information for as well, in case that's something that Tag B would be interested in pointing to?
Well, it's certainly possible. So I guess, are you asking how would this relate to the kinds of things that we're collecting? So,
yeah. I mean, it's a very specific set because it's not just training. They're not just saying, oh, what's data management in general. They are, and this is what we're already doing, but it's a subset of it. They really are talking about at least two topics I see from their charter or their document. One is how to find a repository, or what kind of questions, or how to engage with a repository. So that could be a training, a researcher thing still. Like,
sure.
If you were to look for a repository, what kind of questions you need to ask yourself, or what kind of information you need to gather. So that's one set. And the other set is the audience will probably be to the publisher, but it's probably training their reviewers within the publisher world. Like, if we're talking about review, if we're talking about data review, what are some of the things that, or data management plan review, what should be some of the things that the reviewer should be looking at? And that could eventually be even broadened out to the funders group as well, because again, like I said, this is a very specific set. And so I think if we decided to do that, we will have to be very careful not to get distracted, or but just wondering what your thoughts on those are.
Well, I think this is a kind of conversation that we should really be having on Monday, for instance, at the Tag C group, because it certainly ties into, the FAIR principles and at what level would do we really want to and need to look for materials. I mean, it seems to me like that it would all be useful, but because we're looking, what we want to do with the Clearinghouse and also with the Tag C group is to find the more specific information as possible that's really going to help address questions that people have. We've got a lot of generic information in there right now, and there's a lot available, but the specific questions that people have about how to do this are certainly relevant and are need to be answered. And if that's a way that we help identify what's available to answer the questions, then I think that's what we could do. One of the things that we really want to do, and I forgot to mention this with the Imls Grant, is selection criteria and collection development policies for the Clearinghouse. And if part of what we're doing is to think about that FAIR framework, for instance, for FAIR data principles as a framework for resources, the level to which people collect or create resources would all be relevant to include. So that's what my thought would be. But
I can add a little too.
Yeah, please.
Sophie's first thought on selecting a repository. Tag A is very specifically determining that.
Oh, great.
We're going to have the selection criteria, and we are also looking at building through this project a tool that can be used by journals and funders and researchers to find the right repository, knowing that it will evolve, knowing that we want more domain repositories and less general repositories. Or if we're using a general repository, we have the right curation services available. So in case anyone thinks I all of a sudden don't like general repositories, oh no, we need them. They just don't have all the services that we prefer. the other piece of that you said, Sophie, was training peer review for what to look for, data related. I did just do a class. I did just build content for a class, and we delivered it at AGU on that topic from the publisher side, not a repository side. So there is nuance between, publisher peer review does not look at quality levels of metadata. They look for the fact that an appropriate repository was selected, that a data citation exists, et cetera, that you know how to pick the right repository. So there's dependency there. And there was a desire to do a webinar that could then be included in the Clearinghouse. And we also got a request from NASA to come to Goddard to do it. As a matter of fact, thanks for reminding me. I need to get back to that person.
Well, the slides themselves could be put in too, Shelley.
Good point.
Yeah.
And so I should give you the slides.
Yep.
Yeah, Shelley, I think that's so important. Thank you for sharing that, because I think the most recent conversation about the first thought is I'm really glad I forgot about Group A. Or Tag A. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I'm glad that you reminded us about Tag A. So that's something that definitely would be good to bring up to the Tag B if that conversation comes up again. But in terms of what to review and who to review what, that was just something that I picked up from AGU meeting. People do seem to be really interested in understanding who should be looking at what and to what extent, and what kind of quality can that review group be able to help uphold and such. So while the publishers can definitely help in reviewing certain things, I think it would be really great to say that publishers are also partnering with repositories to review other things. Yes. I remember this is something that I think both you and other panelists have talked about, how that could be really helpful in raising the profile of repository and bringing the repositories into this conversation or landscape, allowing the researchers to realize we are all working together. Again, it's a full cycle that while they deposit something with the publishers actually want them to work with the repositories as well, and vice versa. And so I think it's great to have your slides to see what publishers can actually help in reviewing, and then maybe the remaining piece is then I think it's probably already highlighted here. I see from the charter for Tag C that data repository managers, so part of that could be the training for data repository managers in terms of what they could help in reviewing to help ensuring the quality of FAIR in all areas. So
yeah, the second topic for Monday, the combined topics, will be a conversation on essentially that. We want to be really careful to acknowledge that's what's happening within domain repositories that support communities is considered to be very good because they meet the needs of those communities. So So when we talk about, I think I called it best practices for metadata or something along those lines, that is the value add that curation does for our data sets. So part of the goal for that session, and it's only like an hour and a half, we will not get to the end of the conversation, but what we want to establish is that we want to have this conversation, and we want a group to continue to evolve what we mean here. And the purpose would be to help extract the value that's provided by curation and take a look at that from the point of view of a researcher who doesn't have curation support, and what could we expect, what sort of tool exists, and I'm not an expert in this area, but people that will be there Monday, people who are part of our project, and certainly others are experts, and we'd like to be able to come up with a space where we can get all of our data into a position of being fully fair, including reusable, over time. We won't get there with this project directly, but we'd like to set the path to get there.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I said, as extension to your thought, Shelley, I don't know if it's too complicated to bring that in right now, but I'll just throw it out there. I happened to meet someone at HU as well, and he had been one of the reviewers for NASA's ROSES programs, and he had mentioned to me that he would really love for the funders reviewers to get trained as well.
That came up in the funder. They didn't become a tag, but when the funders met on the first day of the stakeholder meeting, that came up as an important element for what they need to work on. Raleigh, are you still on this phone?
Yes, yeah, I'm still listening. And actually, I can confirm that that is an interest, at least within NSF, to provide better guidance to reviewers of proposals. So I don't know if NSF is ready to kind of engage yet on this question, but certainly we'll be listening closely to kind of ideas as they develop on this.
And I think through the project we can telegraph some things that we would like to see come out of that review process, which I think is a good synergy to share. You know, here we're at the back end of the process. Hello, front end, could you please add these things in? You know, that makes a lot of sense for us to keep these conversations going. And I know Raleigh's working on helping folks stay in touch.
Yeah, and so as part of this tag group then, would that be a good persona to kind of keep in mind? Like what Nancy said earlier about actually being able to identify resources that will be more appropriate for specific audience or specific type of persona. I see who's the audience section right in the charter, so I'm wondering if
good
it
point.
would be just keep an eye on it, not like as we progress. If we are able to actually identify things, it would be good to say, yeah, we do see a possibility down this path, but if we don't, would that be a good thing to consider?
So training, where it says training the trainers, you mean that kind of an audience? Yeah. That makes sense to me. I didn't know, I wasn't sure what that was referring to, so it was part of the conversation, but seems worthwhile. Let me put that in. So
I think that's very valuable, but we also need to recognize that when it comes from a funder point of view, they have more moving parts. It can't be as prescriptive maybe as we'd like. So as we think through that, we just have to be cognizant of the scope there, and that their needs are very broad, and we certainly can help, but we just have to realize they're going to have a point of view that will be, perhaps we won't be able to realize all of the different elements they have to consider.
Yeah,
I guess the one thing I would point out, though, to kind of make this a little bit easier, is that at least at NSF, the data management plan policy explicitly says that the definition of data and what is adequate training, or sorry, what is adequate sharing, what is adequate accessibility, is to be defined by the community and kind of implemented through the review process for grant proposals. So therefore, it's not irrelevant, you know, kind of having these activities occur outside of the funding agencies, and then to kind of inform scientists who then get onto panels to review proposals. And, you know, if they're aligned on that mindset of what is important, then that will, you know, affect how funding agencies are making their decisions, at least at a place like NSF that strives to be community driven in how it makes decisions.
Yeah, and sorry, my one last thought on this is just that, Shelley?
Go ahead. I just have to step away for a moment, so sorry.
Yeah, my one last thought on that was just going back to what Shelley said about funders are different, kind of just like repositories, but I think from my conversation with this NASA individual, I think it is possible to have specific use cases. For example, for him, since he was talking specifically about the roses, and so he was saying that that is a very specific kind of proposal or specific kind of track to propose into NASA. So for their reviewers, they should be able to train them, and in fact, he's taking on that responsibility sort of to train the other rose reviewers, but in a kind of ad hoc kind of way. So I think I agree with Shelley that we need to be a little. We need to be cognizant of the varieties, but at the same time, if we do see a specific case or specific path that we can contribute into, like what Riley was saying, kind of inform the process, then maybe that would be a good thing to just kind of keep an eye on. Well, that's it. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, back. I had to take a call. Sorry about that.
Okay. Great. So that I think this will all be good for discussion on Monday for those who can be there as well, and we'll certainly bring it back to the working group discussions as well in the future, I'm sure. So anyway, well, in honor of the hour, I think I will go ahead and close it unless anybody has something else to report or say.
Just briefly, could everyone just mention whether they'll be at the meeting on Monday, just so roughly. I know that Nancy, you'll be there.
Right.
Obviously, Shelley, I'll be there.
I'll be there, Riley.
I was feeling like maybe no.
I'll be there.
I'm planning to be there, but I'm also going to be at the Geosemantic Symposium.
Oh, you're cloning yourself, Bob.
Yeah, yes, I'm actually traveling down there on Monday, so I'll be late to boot.
Just too busy. Okay. And then John is calling, I think, right? Who else?
I'll be on remotely, that is correct.
And Eric will be there. Eric said he was going to be there, so. Is that good?
And this is Amber. I'm going to try and be there remotely, but I'm 3 hours behind in California, so depends how early I wake up.
Yeah, that's a little early. You can skip the breakfast, right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Sounds good. Well, we'll be in touch then. Thanks very much for joining.
Great, everybody.
All right. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.